I'm going to skip a couple of slides. Please read through this material. Like I said, everything down here is just so. There's something I want to talk to you about. Is what's called function overloading. What this thing is, because function overloading is so important. How you understand how function works and how you overload it. For example, whether regardless of this is a void or a value returning. So, for example, let's say I take something that we just did. I'm going to do like an int sample function, for example, and then I'm going to call, I'll call in, this is int a with this thing, and I'll start with a curly brackets. I'll tell this to do something like a plus that, which means this plus a plus 1. I'll increment a with this thing, right? Same thing. And I do b. I haven't passed across b, but I say b minus decrement minus 1 in this thing. Something along this line. Now, in here, I'm making this thing up as int b. Now, inside of this thing, what is this thing you can call again? This is your function header. This is your data type. I know this is the data type starts out with, so this makes what? This is your value returning function, so which requires for me to do, at the end of the day, I got to return what is return a plus b, for example. Okay, so if I did this, whatever this comes out to be, if I pass in a 3 or 5, well, that's not the point right now. But in here, I can actually overload this function name, for instance, right? You have this function name that I call a sample function. Well, what if I took the same function that I have right here, and it's perfectly fine for me to do this. I can create that. One option is I can go in here and change this data type. This part right here is what's called a signature. A signature consists of 3 things: the data type, its identifier, and the third thing is the order it's been passed in. So let me show you how I can actually overload this function. Here's a function that's in A. I can do this, or I can do this. This is a different signature, right? Regardless, this has the same body. I don't care about that. The signature is, this is the part. Or I can come in, I can do this. I can come in and give this as a double and a different data type with this thing. Okay? So that's a different one. Or I can come across this thing and change up my order that I passed in. So this could be, let's say this is, I don't know, I could take this thing out. Okay? So that's a different function. And overloading a function, my whole point of saying is this is the signature. You could change out the data type, you could change out the identifier, you could change out the order that you pass it out regardless of the set. So as long as the signature is different, that's the key thing I want to point out, is the signature must be different with this thing. Okay. So that's what this is about. This is what it does not include the return type of the function with the same, but it's when you overload creating several function with the same name, like I just did. The signature of the function, the name, and the formal parameter of the list of the function, that's considered the function. 2 functions are said to have different formal parameters, and as long as the number of the formal parameters is different, if the number of the formal parameters is the same, but the different data type, exactly what I just said a few minutes ago. So please read through this. This is the wording of the book with it, but I just gave you some default with it as well. I do want to bring your attention that there is a default. Every programming language has a default settings with this thing. So if you don't set things, or what's called non-argument things, so you can set things to null, a certain argument to 0, and a certain by default it's going to default to a false with it. So that's just the default with that thing. Okay. So that's I just want to highlight some of the key concept with this thing in chapter 6 with it is the void function and the user-defined function. And the void function and the user-defined function has 2. There's returning function, and there are void function, and there's reference data type that you can refer as to the reference parameter, which is the reference variable. Okay, So very important things to look at. I want just before we wrap up this chapter 6 with it, I want to do some problems with you in this next slide. A few things in here. Cannot specify a value for a default parameter for a function prototype. You can't do that. If you do not specify a value for a default parameter when you call the function, the default is used with it. All the default parameter must be the rightmost parameter of the function with it. The default parameter is not specified. You must omit all the arguments to its right with it. So this is saying that all the stuff that we talked about their scopes and default values to be a constant, globals, and function calls with this thing. So please take the time to read this chapter. I'm brushing through this. I cover about half an hour in videos of this thing, in lecture-wise with this thing. But you know, reading this to you, you're not going to learn. The way how you're going to learn for me to show you how to swim is I get in the water with you in this thing. So I'm gonna go over some problems with you in this next couple of videos with it. Okay, so this wraps up the PowerPoint slides right now. Thank you.